Welcome to Bite-Sized Bios. This is meant to be a mini-sode that will accompany HDTH. Every week, I will pick a person from history and dive into their lives. All right, and welcome back to another episode of Bite-Sized Bios, BSB. This week, we're talking about Richard Pryor, the world-famous comedian who has been dead for about almost 20 years now. But we're definitely going to get into that, and there is a little kind of holdover or pullover from the previous episode. I connected dots on some things that I wasn't sure about, but we'll get to that in the episode. So as always, because this is the BSB, this is the mini episode accompaniment to HDTH. How did that happen? We got to go back into last week's episode, which was on the interstate highway system. And that was, I would say, really eye-opening for me as someone who's been driving for about 20 years or so now. And I'm a thinker, so I'm always, when you're on road trips, you look at the roads and you just wonder, I do, how did this happen? I mean, that's why the podcast, that's why I do this podcast, because I literally ask myself that question all the time about different things. And you realize that it was a labor that was just in the making for 45. Really, I mean, if you really think about it, which I didn't mention this, and that's why we do the mini episode to kind of just flesh it out a little more. When they first signed in the act or whatever that gave the funds for the Army to go across the country and decide if there should even be some sort of system, that was 1990. So we're talking, and then they finally finished the full interstate system. I believe it was in 1990. So we're talking 71 years. It took 71 years to create an interstate highway system in the United States of America. I wonder how long it would take. I wonder, and that's something that I wouldn't say this needs a part 2, but I am curious, and maybe it is. Maybe we'll do international interstates next time, because I would really wonder. I mean, we did the Autobahn, and I thought I actually had some others, which is why I said that we might do them, but I realized I only had Germany's, and people do it differently. They do it very differently. I mean, like I said, I love the fact that they have phones on the side of the highway in Germany. That's amazing. You know, because there have been times, I mean, I wonder all the time when I get on the road, if I get on the road and my phone is about to die, I'm like, oh my gosh, what would I do if my car broke down right now and my phone died? Well, if you're in Germany, you just walk to the nearest phone because they have those and they've thought this through. You know, Americans, I mean, how hard would it be? Throw a couple phones out there. But it's, I mean, I guess it'd be because those are really what they do. They can tell you exactly where you are and everything, those phones, if you really listen to the last episode. But yeah, I mean, that's why I want to do more international interstates. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to mention about the interstate system. It was really cool how Dwight D. Eisenhower was completely just in there the entire time, from the beginning all the way. I mean, I don't think he didn't see its end, because I'm not sure when Dwight D. Eisenhower died, but I'm pretty sure it was before 1990. I could be wrong. Yeah, Dwight D. Eisenhower, President Eisenhower died in 1969. So yeah, he definitely did not. He didn't even see the first, because it was the 70s before Nebraska even finished their first whole section. That's crazy. I bet he was just when is this stuff going to stop? Because it was going to take 12 years, and it took 35 from the beginning of the actual signing of the bill. But yeah, good episode. Definitely hoping for more good episodes as we go on. Can't believe we are. Next episode is episode 66, I think. I mean, we are chugging along here, coming up on almost to a year and a half of doing HDTH. But yeah, before I start rambling too much, always hdthappen.com to find out all the extras. We got works cited, we got pictures, videos sometimes of all the different episodes. Show you where I get the information from. At HDTHappen for all the socials. That's mainly Instagram and Twitter. If you like what you hear here, give us a like and subscribe wherever you find this podcast. If you want to give us 5 stars, that is awesome. If you want to give us 2 stars, tell us why you didn't want to give us 5 stars. That's fine as well. Constructive criticism is always welcome. I think that's about all I have for you guys before we get into the episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. I tried to keep it a little more bite-sized than last week's. But yeah, without further ado, as we're going to do here is the episode.
Because the life's been good to me. I wouldn't let it be. I found I wanted to have the suffer of the artist, the and I went about trying to find it, through drugs, because I wanted to be a part of. I never felt connected to anything or anybody, and I never knew how to love, especially myself. I didn't know about that. I'm a romantic person. I like to be romantic, but I don't necessarily like being in love, because I really don't understand that.
We are here today to talk about Richard Pryor. Pryor was born on December the 1st, 1940 in Peoria, Illinois. He grew up in a brothel that was run by his grandmother, Marie Carter, because his mother, she was an alcoholic and a prostitute as well. His father, Leroy Buck Carter Pryor, who knows where that name came from, was a former boxer, hustler, and pimp. Now, Gertrude, his mother, abandoned the family when Pryor was about 10 years old. So he was raised mainly by his grandmother, who once again ran a brothel. She was a tall, violent woman who would beat him for any of his quote-unquote eccentricities. Pryor was one of 4 children that was raised in that brothel, so there was just a lot of kids running around that whorehouse there. He was sexually abused at the age of 7 and expelled from school at the age of 14. It does say that while he was there, he became a Freemason. I suppose that had to have happened after being 14 at some point. He served in the Army, which is something that I don't think I really ever knew. He was in the Army for 2 years, but spent almost the entire time of that stint in prison, in an Army prison. This was because, I guess he and some of his friends, this was while they were in West Germany, somewhere between 1958 and 1960, they had watched the movie Imitation of Life. And I've never seen it, so I can't really comment on whatever. But I guess there's something that happens in there, and he and some other black guys were mad at a white guy they were watching it with because he was evidently over amused at the racially charged scenes that occurred during that film. And so they beat him up and stabbed him. I did not see that coming. But they didn't kill him. But that's why he was for his time in the Army, he was pretty much in prison the entire time. He came home in 1960 and married a woman named Patricia Price. They had 1 kid, and then they divorced. It was after this that he would begin to pursue a career in comedy. In 1963, Pryor moved to New York City and began performing regularly in clubs alongside acts such as Bob Dylan and Woody Allen. That's pretty cool. So I'm a really big fan of Bob Dylan. We should probably cover Woody Allen here one time or not, yeah. But to know that he was out there in that scene, I never really knew that. It's pretty cool. So one of his first nights at performing, he opened for singer and pianist Nina Simone at New York's Village Gate. And he had problems with anxiety, which is something that I also did not know beforehand. I think that happens with a lot of people who end up performing. I think people don't realize I don't even think it's so much that these people love being in front of so many people or performing in so many people as much as they have an urge to do a thing that requires them to be in front of a bunch of people. Because I feel like people are always like, why, if you love to do this, why would you feel so anxious about it? It's like, maybe, he's funny, he wants to be funny. The idea of doing it in front of a large state or in front of a large amount of people can be, I guess, nerve-wracking for him. And I think in order to make himself more comfortable, he would actually, and if I'm reading this right, would become more profane. He would add more profanity into his act to make himself, not to make himself feel more comfortable, but I guess to make him feel more like himself, which then made him feel comfortable. He would start, heavy use of the N-word, which would become, a large part of his vernacular. It would even be in part of one of the comedy albums that he released. We'll get to that in a little bit. He released his first album in 1968. I don't think I have the name of it here. He would end up getting married again to a woman named Shelley Bonus, which does not sound like a real name. It sounds like some type of bonus. Like, I'll give you a bonus. What kind of bonus? A Shelley bonus. I mean, I don't know what it is. I'm not trying to be derogatory. I'm just saying, that doesn't sound like a real name. But they got married in 1967. They had 1 kid, one and done. She's Elizabeth. They got divorced in 1969. This guy was married for 2 years. How long was he married? Do I have how long he was married to the old Patricia Price? Let's run it back here. Oh, let's see. Well, it looks like 2 years here because they married in 1960 and he moved to New York City after divorcing her in 63. So this guy has a pretty, he's in and out as a husband. If that's what you're looking for, this guy will not be there very long. So after his divorce, he signed with the comedy-oriented independent record label Laugh Records in 1970 and recorded his second album, Craps (parentheses After Hours). A couple years later, he was in a documentary called Watt Stacks. I'm guessing it's Watt Stacks. I don't know but I don't know what that is. But he was in that documentary. He riffed on the tragic comic absurdities of race relations in Watts in the United States. So that's, I guess, what happened in there. Then he came out with his third album in 74, which is called That N-Word Is Crazy. This was released on Laugh. He actually had some issues with Laugh. They tried to file an injunction so that he couldn't actually release it, but he ended up being able to sell it anyways. He was the first black guest host on SNL. Little trivia for you right there, if you're ever out and someone asks you. I didn't know. That's pretty cool. If you would imagine, if you were going to guess, who else would you guess? I don't know, Sidney Poitier? We're talking like 1975. It's famous black people of 1975. I don't know many others. Because I'm not, I wasn't around then. But, yeah, so he was the first black guest host on the first season of SNL. Let's see. He became the first black actor to earn $1 million for one single film when he was hired to star in Stir Crazy. And when he got on the set of that, he did a little freebasing, doused himself in rum, and then set himself on fire. Yes, he did. And he would end up actually putting this into his comedy. He was okay. He didn't die from that. He joked that he had this joke, and my dad would always tell me this joke. This is kind of my first really bits of understanding or knowing Richard Pryor. He would tell me this because he had a joke where he was talking about what people talking about him and the fact that he got himself set on fire, and so he lit a match and then he just kind of bopped it around with his hands, and then he was like, "What is that?" That's Richard Pryor running down the street. And so that my dad would do that joke for me as a child, and it is funny, but it's so it's really good the people that can laugh at their pain. It really is, because that's what you have to do in life. If you don't laugh at your own pain, man, it can get dark pretty quick. But we'll get back to Mr. Pryor. He also, I didn't know much about the man, but he had his own kids show, like Sesame Street type kids show. Like, even he was on Sesame Street, which I think I knew that, but I did not know he had his own show. It was called Pryor's Place, and it was the same thing. He had his own cast of puppets. They were hanging out and having fun in the inner city, but then they would talk about like real stuff, like, they would deal with like more sobering, like real world environment stuff. And they were like, yeah, we got to get this out there, bro. Because Cookie Monster ain't talking about like his feelings and everything like that, and what's going on with like his parents, he's not talking about, he's just like doing whatever Cookie Monster does. Oh, you know what? And I'm seeing this right now, and we talked about it. It's crazy that I mentioned it. I mentioned it in the Malcolm X BSB. But I talked about the fact that we had covered a number of men who have been intimate with other men. And I actually let the cat out of the bag that the next episode was going to be on Richard Pryor. Funny thing, and I did say that in the last one, because I knew, I think he had sex with someone famous, but I couldn't remember who it was. And I'm reading the notes right now. It was, are you ready for it? Marlon Brando. Richard Pryor had sex with Marlon Brando. How do we know? Because Quincy Jones was there. I don't know if he was there, but he saw it. Or I don't know if he saw it, but he knew it happened. That's it right there. That's what Quincy Jones told Vulture magazine, that he slept with Richard Pryor slept with Marlon Brando. And then actually Pryor's widow actually confirmed this as well. So like, it's real. Like, they got it in. The Beast with Two Backs, what happened between Marlon Brando and Richard Pryor. You heard it here first, or really kind of here probably like way second or third, but you heard it here. And so he, got older. He got older and he had started to have declining health. He had a mild heart attack in 1977. Kind of beginning this. We're kind of going back a little bit, but I'm kind of setting you up for his demise, basically. But yeah, he had a heart attack in 1977 at age 36. He recovered. He was cool. In 1986, he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And then 4 years later, in 1990, he had another heart attack while he was in Australia. The next year, he went into a triple heart bypass surgery. So like, this guy, that's why I went over to the 77 to kind of bring it up and just realize that he was kind of in for it. You know what I mean? And so on December the 10th, 2005, 9 days after his 65th birthday, Pryor had a third heart attack in LA. After his wife's failed attempts to resuscitate him, he was taken to a local hospital where he was pronounced dead at 7:58 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So 10:58 if you're on the East Coast, if anybody's wondering. And his wife/widow was quoted as saying, "At the end, there was a smile on his face," end quote, which is pretty cool. And I don't want to give away, because I've always wanted to do like a podcast or like a book on people's last words before they die. I think not all of them are going to be profound, or worth hearing and remembering, but a lot of them I think can at least provide some type of insight into, I don't know, something. Just because what Steve Jobs' like last words were like, "Oh, it's beautiful," or like something like that. I read the book, I forget what his last words were, but yeah. So he back to Mr. Pryor, Richard Pryor. He gets cremated. His ashes were given to his family, and they were scattered in Hawaii in 2019. So they were held on to for almost 15 years. All right. That was Richard Pryor. I don't know if you people have ever heard of him. Like I said, he's somebody that's been in my life for pretty much since I could, listen and understand things. My family's really big into comedy. I like comedy a lot. But yeah, it was really interesting. Like I said, it was cool. We could actually match it up, because when I did the episode a couple weeks ago, whenever it was, and I actually ended up saying about Richard Pryor or him having sex with somebody, I really could. I remember in my head I was like, "There's somebody famous. I can't remember who it was." And you find out that he's had sex with somebody else that we did a BSB on like 2 weeks ago, and they had a little thing going. Isn't that interesting? I think it is. But yeah, so I hope you guys liked it. Keep covering people. If you want somebody covered that you think we should be covering, drop it on the Twitter, drop it on the Instagram, or on the website, or just stop me on the street if you actually know me and live around me, however you want to do it. I always appreciate you guys pressing play from week to week. I don't think there's much else to say. So yeah, give us a like and subscribe wherever you hear this. 5 stars if you can, 2 stars if you don't want to, and then tell us why you didn't want to, because constructive criticism is always welcome. And we'll see you in a couple days with the next HDTH.